What if the British Army had completely taken over Boston? Boston was a highly important and symbolic center of the American Revolutionary War. The siege of the city between 1775 and 1776 is considered a milestone marking the beginning of the American Revolution. If the British Army had succeeded in the siege and had taken complete control of Boston, not only would the course of the war have changed, but the dream of American independence would have been placed in severe jeopardy. Boston was not only a military stronghold, but also, at that time, the political and economic heart of the colonies. The city housed many leaders and champions of freedom who led the revolution. Had the British Army fully conquered Boston, all these leaders would either have been arrested or forced to flee. Without them, the unity of the colonies could have broken apart, and the revolutionary movement would have lost its direction. Furthermore, British naval control over Boston's harbor would have been strengthened, preventing the colonies from receiving any aid or weapons via sea routes. The American Army, which was already suffering from a shortage of resources, would have become even weaker in such a scenario. The lack of food, weapons, and ammunition would have severely impaired the American forces' ability to fight. If the British Army had fully captured Boston, other colonies would likely have stopped considering rebellion or would have become loyalists. People would have been frightened to see that the British Army was extremely powerful and that there was no hope left for the revolution. In this way, Britain could have succeeded in expanding its control and strengthening its grip over North America. On a global level, this victory would have also meant that France and other European powers would have refrained from aiding the American Revolution. It would have proven to them that the American rebellion was meaningless and failing. Without French support, the chances of the American Revolution succeeding would have been considerably reduced. However, history has also taught us that oppression and occupation often intensify resistance. Even if Boston had fallen, other colonies and rural areas might have launched a more aggressive and prolonged war. A long and bloody conflict could have erupted, making it difficult for the British Army to maintain control over every region. Certainly. Here is the exact English translation of your Urdu text, with no omissions, additions, or changes, presented in detailed paragraphs. What if America's first president had been someone other than Washington? George Washington is called the father of the American nation, and his leadership gave America's history a unique direction. But if Washington had not become the first president of America and someone else had taken his place, how might the country's history have changed? During his tenure, Washington established a tradition, especially by voluntarily stepping down after 2 terms as president. This set a standard for strengthening democracy and peaceful transfer of power. Had he not done this, civil war or dictatorship might have become a possibility in the country. Politically, Washington was a leader who strengthened the unity among the different colonial states. His popularity and reputation united the American nation. If someone else, weaker or more controversial, had become president instead, cracks between the colonies could have deepened and the country might have become unstable. Militarily, Washington is often held as an example. He was not only a military commander, but also a moral leader who did not misuse his power. Without him, it is possible that key victories, like the victory at Yorktown, might not have been achieved or that military mutinies could have occurred. Washington also maintained balance in foreign policy, which helped America avoid involvement in European wars and strengthened its power. If another president had adopted a more aggressive or flawed foreign policy, America might have gotten into trouble early in its history. Culturally, Washington played the role of a powerful symbol in shaping America's new identity. His simplicity, honesty, and sacrifice inspired Americans with a new spirit. If his role had been weak, America might have struggled to define its nationality. The importance of Boston in the American Revolutionary War is undeniable. This city was considered the center of the freedom movement, where leaders dreaming of liberty took the first step together against British rule. In 1775, the British Army besieged Boston but did not gain complete control. However, if they had fully taken control of Boston, the scenario of the American Revolution would have been completely different. After capturing Boston, the British Army would have arrested or killed revolutionary leaders like Paul Revere, John Hancock, and Samuel Adams. These individuals were the backbone of the movement, and without them, unity among the colonies might have ended. Americans would have had no strong leadership to unite them on a single platform. Furthermore, British naval control over the harbor would have been strengthened, which would have disrupted maritime supply lines to the colonies. The American Army, already suffering shortages of weapons, ammunition, and food, would have become even weaker. This situation would have pushed the Americans toward defeat in the war. Moreover, with the victory in Boston, the threat of British occupation would have increased in other cities as well. Fear and panic would have spread among the colonies, and many people might have sided with the British government. Consequently, Britain could have strengthened its hold over North America and successfully suppressed the revolution on the global stage. The effects of Boston's capture would also have been significant. European powers like France, Spain, and the Netherlands would have refrained from taking interest in the American Revolution. They would have been convinced that the rebellion had failed and would hesitate to damage their relations with Britain. Thus, without international support, the American Revolutionary Movement would have edged toward its end. However, historical facts show that oppression and occupation usually increase resistance. Although the capture of Boston would have been in Britain's favor, the war could have intensified in rural areas and other colonies. A long and bloody conflict might have erupted, making it difficult for the British Army to maintain control over every region. Without France's help, the map of the American Revolutionary War would have been completely different. Not only would financial aid have been missing, but it would have been almost impossible to face the British military power. Without French naval support, the British Navy would have completely closed sea routes, preventing Americans from receiving necessary supplies. France's military expertise and experience were also a great asset for the American Army. It is also important that France's support helped Americans to be recognized as a legitimate and strong movement on the international level. After France's intervention, other powers like Spain and the Netherlands also sided with America, increasing pressure on Britain. Without French help, the American movement would have been internationally isolated and Britain could have easily crushed it. Furthermore, French support encouraged Americans to keep fighting despite severe difficulties. Without this support, many common Americans and leaders might have given up and returned under British rule. In such circumstances, the dream of American independence would have seemed very far away.